Hello again YouTube, and welcome back to Just Get a Tesla. Today I am going from my home in northern Aberdeenshire to Kendal in the Lake District. I have actually charged the car all the way up to 100% for the first time. So I've got a new thing showing on my screen, which is this, which shows me that the amount of regenerative braking is reduced, and instead it is blending from braking from the brake discs, which is good to know because when you lift off, the car just rolls. It doesn't regenerate really a lot. Let's just test that again, and it shows it's regenerating, but we're not slowing down particularly quickly. So it's going to be a little bit different. It is 6 degrees, it is damp. We've had a horrible weather system over the country for the last couple of days with various roads flooded. So this is going to be, ooh, that is a Genesis, I think GV60 going past the other way. That's the first one of those that I've seen in the metal. I am a big fan of Hyundai, and Genesis is their premium brand. I'm sure that is a fabulous car. As you can see, it is really wet. There's an awful lot of standing water on the roads. That is really going to impact efficiency because water is drag and the car has to work harder to maintain speed. So it will be interesting to see just how poor our efficiency is when it is fairly cold and there's all of this standing water. What's also interesting is that the battery is now on 93%. It's still showing me the symbol showing that it is using blended braking. I believe that symbol is something new for the latest software release. And if you've seen my short on that, you'll have seen the things that it told me about, which wasn't this. Anyway, this is still showing on 93%. It will be interesting to see what the state of charge needs to drop to before the car decides that it can just use regen braking. Okay, so we have just dropped to 90% on the battery. I'm not sure what you can actually see of this because of the huge glare coming off the road with all of the spray. But at 90% state of charge, the symbol has just gone away for blended braking. So clearly, anything above 90%, it doesn't think there is enough regen power to be able to function normally. So how are we doing for efficiency? On the 15-mile average, which is, well, the trip that I've done now, maybe a little bit more than that, but I'm showing an average of 287 watt hours per kilometre. My overall average in the car is 278, if you can see that, but if you can't, whatever. So despite the wet, it's not actually making as big a difference as I thought that it would do, which is interesting. Let's see how we do. Having another look at energy consumption, so I'm on 85% battery. It's saying that I have burned 3.3% more than it was expecting, and all of that has come from driving. So it's saying uphill cost me 2.4%, going downhill saved 2.7%. This is since I left home with a full charge, but it's okay. Again, if I go back on to consumption and look on the last 15 miles, actually, yeah, 322 watt hours per kilometre. That is quite high. Go on to the 3295. I've done more than 30 miles since I left home. So yeah, 295, okay. Considering that it's 8 degrees and I've been driving through quite a lot of wet and standing water, I don't think that's bad at all. Taking a slightly different route to my usual route south by going across the Tay Bridge, having cut through Dundee city centre. This is actually not my favourite bridge. It's quite narrow and bouncy, but it's worth the trip. I am cutting through the Kingdom of Fife to have a look at this route across instead. Here you can see they have had to put temporary lights in because of the flooding. This has completely flooded out across the road. I suspect the whole road would have been flooded as recently as yesterday. And another flood. Autopilot really doing its thing here as we go through the interestingly titled Crook of Devon. sometimes I do wonder whether it's going to work on urban streets like this, where you've got houses on both sides and parked vehicles, but so far it's amazing. It is 4:25 and it's going fairly heavily dark. This is the joys of winter here in Scotland, but it is rather pretty. We are at Euro Central. I have put in the T-Bay supercharger in as an additional stop because that's where I'm planning to stick a load more charge into the car. So it's now going to tell me how much charge I've got when I arrive there. So at the moment it's saying 4%, but it's telling me to stay here for another 10 minutes. Now, the point to make here is fairly simple. You want to arrive at superchargers with the lowest amount of charge that you can, because the battery charges faster. So sitting waiting on a supercharger, putting as much power in as you can, if you don't need to, don't do it, because the longer you're here, the slower the charge. So I arrived on about 26% and the charging speed initially was 135 kilowatts. We're now down to 100 kilowatts and it's only going to keep dropping. So I am quite literally going to sit here until it tells me to go, and then I'm going to disconnect and I'm going to go. Something that I've learned, thanks to you guys in the comments, is that you cannot rely on the mileage figure, which is shown up here where percentage is now. So I've just clicked on that and it says 215 miles of range on 68% of the battery. That apparently is based on WLTP average, which I'm not getting. So if I put the data screen on and have a look at consumption on the 30-mile average, I'm doing 338 watt hours per mile and it's giving me a range of 154 miles. So 217, 154. There's a 60-mile difference between the two predictions. So the straightforward thing to do is just completely ignore the number up there and put it on percentage. That is something that I simply didn't understand until comments in videos told me that that was true. If you're getting a Tesla and you're trying to understand how to plan some of these trips, just ignore the mileage up there. We're coming up on Gretna on the way south, and on the map is showing a symbol which I haven't actually seen before. And where the superchargers are, instead of the red pin showing the number of free stalls, instead it's a greeny grey colour pin with a clock in it. And what I believe that means is that if you went there you would have to wait because all stalls are full. Now there's only actually 4 stalls at the Gretna supercharger. There really needs to be a lot more than that, but with the number of Teslas now being released and sold, I'm not surprised that some of these smaller superchargers are now quite busy. I've arrived at T-Bay supercharger. So as you can see, we're getting 145 kilowatts. It's saying 10 minutes remaining to continue trip. That won't be the case in a second, because what I'm going to do is tell it where it's going next. So what it's going to do now is it's going to work out how much charge that it wants me to do. Yeah, it wants me to put a little bit in and then come straight back here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put more in than that, and we'll decide on when to go a little later. I've finished eating and we're up to 80%, which is absolutely fine. So we are going to go and unplug. And the flap's already closed. So, because of the hills on the motorway we've just been on, my range is quite entertaining. 429 miles projected on the 5-mile average and 170 projected on the 30-mile average, and you can see all of this up here. That's why it's projecting so low. There's a whole chunk of downhill from now into Kendal, which actually isn't that far at all. It's another, how far is it? 15 miles. Coming off the M6 now, and a little bit of fog starting to kick in. I mean, there's not actually that far to go until I arrive, but even so, can we leave off the fog? Would be good. Cattle grid. I love that. A cattle grid at the end of a motorway slip road. Nothing coming. It's very dark. It's going to remain very dark, I suspect, all the way down here on this fairly twisty road into Kendal. I am nearly at my destination for the night. I mean, I did set off at 1 o'clock and it's 8:40, but I have had a couple of stops along the way. It's not been a fast trip because I've been doing other things. I even shot another video while I was on the way. So the trip's been absolutely fine, and as usual, it's comfortable in a Tesla. You do not have to think about charging at all. The car tells you when it needs to charge and for how long it needs to charge, and tells you when you can go away again. And that is, you know, that's the advantage that you get with a Tesla that other brands are struggling with because of the issues, shall we say, to be generous, that you have with the public charging network. It's day 2 and I am in Kendal, still in Cumbria, about to head home. So it is 4:20 in the afternoon and the route is already in, and I'm going to get home with a stop in Edinburgh at about 10:30. And yes, this narrow one-way street is the main traffic route through the town, which is interesting. I am at Gretna, having just made an unplanned stop, so I needed the toilet and just bought a drink, and while I was doing so, I've stuck it on the supercharger for, what, 5 minutes? 6, something like that. What it means is that I was going to arrive into Edinburgh on 10%. I'm now going to arrive into the Edinburgh supercharger on 17%, so I can drive a little bit quicker. There are a few places along this road which feel a bit narrow, and it is that the road is narrow, but it's also that the Tesla Model Y is wide. That tightened up like crazy. And we're still waggling around. Left, right, left, right, left. Oh dear, and another one. Blimey, okay, I'm glad I'm through that. It wasn't just so much the turns as the fact that some of those were pretty narrow. The new software update appears to have affected the auto high beams. It is a little more hesitant to switch itself back on. Like now, it took a good few seconds more than I would have taken if I was doing it manually. It is much better though at switching itself off with something coming the other way like there is now. Before I felt that it was a bit slow, and now it is better. But it's also reacting to signs. So most of the road signs that we have in the UK, he's still on his main beam. Oh, it's an Audi. Well, of course it was an Audi. But yeah, most of the road signs we have in the UK have got a reflective backing on them, and the car is reading the light coming back off the reflection on the sign and deciding that it's headlights, or it isn't sure whether it's headlights or not. So it's an improvement from where it was. I still don't think that it's the best that it could be, but what I appreciate at least is that Tesla keep pushing out software updates where their team are still working on it and trying to improve it. I've just arrived at Edinburgh New Bridge, and this is a completely empty supercharger, and it has got 16 V3 chargers, which is exactly what needs to be fitted everywhere, and there's no one else here. So all of the stuff you hear about range anxiety or charger anxiety or there's not enough chargers, they're all full, they're all broken, not a case if you just get a Tesla. Perhaps the only issue with the supercharger at Edinburgh is that it's about a 5-minute walk down to McDonald's and to the garage where you can buy drinks and snacks and things like that. So once again, I am suffering from charger anxiety, not range anxiety. I've walked across to McDonald's, I've used the toilet, I've got my food, and I'm heading back to the car to eat it there, because on these V3 chargers, they charge so rapidly that if I sit and eat inside, it's going to have added more charge than I want. So I'm going back to the car where it's going to be warm and comfortable. You can see I'm back in the car, but what I'm now looking at is where does it get its estimates for state of charge when I get to my destination from. So at the moment it's saying that I've got 163 miles to run and I'm going to arrive home on 4%. So if I look on the energy use graphs, on the 30-mile average it's saying I've got a 177 mile range. So that feels about right for what we're looking at. But I also know that that includes, as you can see, quite a lot of spikes and troughs, and I was hoofing it a little bit on that road on the way back. So if I go into 15-mile range, it's giving me 232 miles versus 178, and if I go into 5 miles, it's giving me a ridiculous 260. So I think in reality, I've got enough power now to be able to go, because cruising on the motorway will burn less power than me hoofing it along, and I have no problem arriving on something like 5% power. So I'm going to go and unplug now because I think I've got enough. A maximum 50 mile an hour bend on a 70 miles an hour motorway. Let's see what autopilot does with this. Will it slow? Will it slow? It is slowing. Good. That's the first time that I've tried to do that. So okay, good, the car slowed itself down. We're going around at 57. So an advisory 50, and it's quite comfortable at 57 miles an hour, but I am quite impressed by that. It did look like we were flying up to it, but then it slowed itself down, we go around the obstacle, and then we speed ourselves back up again. I'm probably going to include a clip of this on every video that I'm going to do at night, just because this is an absolutely amazing structure. We are once again crossing the Forth Estuary just north of Edinburgh on the Queensferry crossing, and this really is a spectacular piece of engineering, which looks even more so at night with the huge concrete pylons rising into the sky lit up. This looks like an absolutely brilliant thing when you're driving across it. And of course on autopilot you can then have a quick glance up through the glass roof and have a look straight up at the things as you're going past them. Brief bit of Tesla convoy here in Dundee. I really fancied a Model S when they first came out. It was the thing that got me into Tesla. Obviously I know it was the Tesla if you discount the Roadster, which is a Lotus, but the Model S when it first came out was just absolutely amazing to me. That was my perception of it, and yeah, I think having now got a Model Y, and let's be clear, the Model Y is a big car, but the S is just that much bigger. It's longer, I think it's even wider, and that elongated wheelbase, you know, I've already had a couple of grounding issues with my Model Y, so an even longer wheelbase on a lower car, I can only imagine how much fun that is if you're going over slightly dodgy surfaces or gradient changes, that kind of thing. It's raining a bit. Absolutely hammering it down. It's just started. It's 5 degrees, so if it gets another couple of degrees cooler, you could start seeing this turning into sleet. It is only a week and a half since I drove down to Aberdeen Airport at 4:30 in the morning, and it was 15 degrees, and that's in mid-November. 15 degrees at 4:30 in the morning. Now it's 5 degrees, it's 9 o'clock at night, and it is absolutely blatting down. Well, that was brief and brutal. It started, it was absolutely hammering down, and then it stopped again. So as you can see, it is now raining again really heavily. Auto wipers are coping okay. There is actually an enormous amount of water coming down now from the sky and landing on the road. Autopilot was okay with it, and then it twitched slightly and disengaged itself for a puddle perhaps. I've put it back on now and let's see how it copes. But I am keeping close watch here because we are starting to get puddles and standing water as we go. I am not clear what autopilot makes of things like standing water, because obviously that creates asymmetric drag on if it's on one side of the car and not the other, or drag across the whole thing. How does its computer interpret that drag on what is impacting the car? If you know, tell me in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious about how Tesla's software programmers make it cope with things like this. Wow, this is really starting to come down now, and I don't know whether it's because it's raining so hard or because it's 5 degrees, but some of this rain is starting to look a little chunky for rain, heading towards the sleety end. So I think this is quite a good test actually. What is autopilot like at night in heavy driving rain with standing water? And mostly it's very good. Mostly. One other quick point: since the last software update, its ability to read speed limit signs I think has got worse rather than better. So I've said in previous videos that it struggles to differentiate between an actual speed limit change and the advanced warning of a speed limit, or a differential speed limit for trucks and things. So here it's telling me that the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. That is incorrect. The speed limit on this road is 70 miles an hour, but on the roundabout it dropped to 40. And what it hasn't done, there we're going past a national speed limit sign, and it's finally updated to 70. But the reason why it was showing 40 is because it missed the NSL white with a black diagonal stripe across signs, which changed the speed limit back to 70. Nearly home now, so I thought I should probably summarize the trip. So if I go on to trips and look at trip A, which is the whole trip there and back to Kendal that I've done, 618 miles at an average of 322 watt-hours per mile. That is well ahead of the overall average, which is now showing us 283. I think it was showing us more like 278 previously. That's not slowing enough. It has been a higher energy use trip. I don't think that is because of the cold so much as it is the wet. So I think I talked about this at the beginning of this video, that the more water that's on the road, the higher the rolling resistance, the more energy you need to push through. It's the same on a fossil engine car as it is an EV. So the wetter and the cooler it is, the more energy you'll burn, whether that's from a battery or being burned as petrol or diesel. But honestly, it's still been a really good trip, and range hasn't been impacted particularly. And frankly, at no point have I really felt like I'm hanging around charging. I mean, I even managed to get a sneaky quick top up while I went to the toilet at Gretna. So make use of the time while you are doing something else to put more charge in the car. Anyway, that is it for Just Get a Tesla this time. As always, Tell me what you think in the comments. There's been quite a lot to talk about in this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you on the next one.